You do have to log in on Chrome to make it work. The other browsers don't.
I did do that, Mayor Sebring, but thank you. I did everything I always do, but it didn't work.
Video's live.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the regular board meeting of June 23rd, 2021. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize this meeting is taking place on the traditional and ceded territories of Coast Salish peoples. And I also want to just recognize that this past Monday was Indigenous Peoples Day across Canada. And for those of you who are able or not, there were a lot of great virtual and in-person events, COVID-safe in-person events throughout the Cowichan region. And I just want to share my gratitude with all of the First Nations within our region for hosting those activities and helping to celebrate an important day in our calendar year. The longest day is a fitting day for us to recognize our Indigenous peoples and our First Nations. And I just want to say on behalf of the board and all of the communities within Cowichan, thank you, and Haichka for all of those efforts in year two of a difficult year. And hopefully we're all able to gather together next year and enjoy the celebrations and recognition of all the contributions to across our great country from Indigenous people from coast to coast to coast. And with that, we will get underway, and I'll turn it over, Ms. Legault, for you to tell us what's next, because I'll always try and skip something.
The first item is approval of the agenda.
And if there's no changes or additions, a motion to approve the agenda. Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Salmon. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item M1 is adoption of the regular board meeting minutes of June 9th, 2021.
If there are no errors or omissions, a motion to adopt the minutes moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That takes us to question period. Public input period, and I've just brought Mr. Evans in and Ms. Kaufman.
All right, Mr. Evans, you're first. Thank you in advance for your email as well, and I'll turn it over to you for input.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. We've sure had an interesting morning, and I hope this afternoon will be just as interesting. On this afternoon's agenda, I think I have some interference here. I'll just shut this off. Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
On this afternoon's agenda is the soil bylaw 43, draft soil bylaw 4380 before you. And it's for your consideration if you pass this or not. Everyone really wants this bylaw to be successful because they have a lot of at stake here. People want to live in peace and quiet. I think it would be fair to say that the more people that scrutinize this bylaw and submitted constructive criticism, the better the bylaw would be. Public consultation has been cut from the new bylaw 4380, the new draft bylaw. And I think it's very important to many citizens because they usually have their life savings tied up in their homes and land. And in some cases, the applicant for the soil deposit bylaw is a taxpayer and has all his money tied up in this too. The electoral area has a very high interest in the relationship with the people that have applied for these applications. And we should read over this public consultation very closely and include it back in, because the without public consultation, we just don't really have any relationship with the CVRD. In the new bylaw, I noticed also that on 8.1G, it states all dirt and mud and debris tracked onto public roads must be removed daily. Earlier on today at your meeting, you had MOTI state to you that the public roads don't belong to the electoral areas. And yet here in this bylaw, we're stating that telling the applicants to go out and work on the public roads. I think we have to look at this bylaw and say, and change things like this. For instance, instead of telling the applicant to go out and clean the road off, it perhaps should be stated that the MOTI and the highways should be told.
Sorry, Mr. Evans, your time is up, and I noted that you've gone on to a subject from this morning's meeting.
No, this isn't. This is on today's meeting. It is, and I quoted it. It is 8.1G on your new. Your new.
I appreciate that. I was just trying to. Your time was up just a couple of minutes ago, but I'll let you finish the thought. I thought I heard you referring to this morning's discussion around MOTI, but go ahead.
So, on 8.1G of the new draft bylaw, it states that all dirt and mud should be taken off the road. And what I'm saying is the CVRD should not be telling an applicant to do something on public roads. The MOTI is in charge of that. So I think we need to have a closer look at this bylaw and really think it over and include the public consultation in the new bylaw. Please don't leave it out.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Ms. Legault, our next public input.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Kaufman is in the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. If you're available, please go ahead. And you have 3 minutes. Sorry, Ms. Legault, I don't see Ms. Kaufman. Oh, maybe it's not in my screen here. Okay, go ahead, Susan. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, thank you. Okay, just let me drop my screen. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Today I was going to speak to the soil deposit bylaw and the staff report on communications and engagement. After reading the reports and listening to the discussions of the regional services meeting this morning and recent interactions with staff, I was left wondering what public consultation and engagement means to the CVRD. In recent years, we have seen a distinct shift in the public's ability to have meaningful interactions with the board. There seems to be a real inequity of balance between the residents, the government, and developers. We see fewer CVRD-hosted public meetings, fewer and less often engagements. Our public hearings are no longer interactive. Our OCP has been taken over by the HOCP, and no one talks about the delay of 2 to 3 years for the harmonized zoning bylaw. How will the OCP work without an updated zoning bylaw? These delays are having real-time effects throughout the district. It is my hope that the CVRD will give more consideration to the public moving forward and engage them in new strategies to make engagement meaningful. On the soil deposit bylaw, I realize that the CVRD has to move forward to better govern soil deposits, but that you will give the affected neighboring property owners the ability to have input, just as you have given those that wish to deposit soil and the ability to apply for rezoning on residential lots. Please keep the public involved. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we can address those comments later in the agenda when those items are brought forward. Any further public input, Ms. Legault?
There is none.
Thank you. So with that, I believe that moves us on in our agenda. Thank you, Ms. Kaufman and Mr. Evans. I do believe next we have a delegation from Kim Stevens and Paul Chapman. Kim is the Executive Director for the Partnership for Water Sustainability BC, and Paul Chapman is the Chair of Watershed Moments series on watershed stewardship and a changing climate, Watershed Moments, Vancouver Island Symposia series on water stewardship and a changing climate. Welcome to you both. I've got so many things and a new WebEx, and apparently I can't fit everybody on one screen. So hopefully I can see all of you. But welcome, and I'll hand it over to you for your delegation. I believe you have 10 minutes. Do you believe you'll be able to complete your presentation within the allotted time?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
All right, please go ahead. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. And again, my name is Kim Stevens, and I'm the Executive Director of the Partnership for Water Sustainability. And I am speaking to you from Bowen Island in the ancestral territories of the Squamish people today. And there it is. Paul is about to share our presentation as I can carry on here. Paul Chapman and I are here to inform you about the Watershed Moments series, and Paul is the series chair. And as some of you will recall from my past presentations, the partnership is the hub for a network and is the secretariat for the Georgia Basin Interregional Education Initiative. And I do wish to emphasize that the CVRD is a founding member of the partnership, and CVRD involvement dates back to 2007, when you were a co-host for an event in the original Showcasing Green Infrastructure Innovation series on Vancouver Island. And the partners share common values and are guided by the statement on your screen, which I'm hoping to see any moment. There it is. Which is that I just want to pause, and as you get a chance to look at that, this is the context for what we do, and for the Symposia series, that by pulling threads of understanding from the past through to the present and future, it would help communities achieve the vision. And I'm going to re-emphasize this: reconnecting people, fish, land, and water in altered landscapes. And if he's ready, I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Executive Director of NULP, Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Chapman. I'm the chair of the Watershed Moments Symposia series, and I'm speaking with you today from the territory of the Snuneymuxw people. The Watershed Moments series has featured water stewardship collaboration stories from different geographic locations on Vancouver Island, sharing the stories from our regional district partners in stewardship. The Watershed Moments team, which includes Kate Miller, Tom Rutherford, and Daryl Tunnicliffe from the Cowichan region, have been meeting to develop ideas about water stewardship experiences in the Cowichan region.
And the series is a building blocks process, and each time we raise the bar to advance collaboration, and our goal is to provide a safe space for conversations. And we really do push the boundaries of our comfort zones. And it is this approach that brings together people and grows both the team and the network. And as Paul catches up, the Watershed Moments team has identified cross-cultural collaboration as a focus for the series. And Michael Blackstock's Blue Ecology provides us with a framework for water reconciliation. And I first became aware of Michael's work in 2008, and I'll just share the anecdote because in 2008 he published a paper which a colleague brought to my attention, And when I read it, my reaction was, wow. And this was just literally weeks before I was to make a presentation to a national water committee, which was convening in Vancouver. And I was so taken by Michael's work on interweaving of Western science and Indigenous knowledge that I actually led off my presentation with a quotable quote from Michael. But it wasn't until 2016 when I met him. We met. We were thinking about this topic of how do we interweave, and I reached out to Michael, and ever since 2016 we've become close friends. And in 2017, the partnership made the decision to showcase what Michael had accomplished in terms of making the case for interweaving of Indigenous knowledge and Western science. And we actually held as our annual workshop series, we held what we call the Blue Ecology Workshop, and we say we're going to start the process of mainstreaming what Michael Blackstock is telling us about. And from our perspective, really the keys that in being able to support what he does is that he has published widely and is recognized by the United Nations. In fact, had served on a global Indigenous panel. So this is kind of the context that Michael brings to this to Blue Ecology.
In Blue Ecology, the interweaving of Indigenous and Western science as they relate to water stewardship is not only the overarching theme of this year's Watershed Moments efforts, it is also the keystone component to water stewardship collaboration going forward. Without the interweaving of knowledge, effective, lasting, and respectful stewardship cannot be attained. This is where water reconciliation begins, and the Cowichan region is Blue Ecology in action.
So in the age of COVID, like everybody else, we have transitioned to online delivery, and last year was our first effort at it. It was quite successful with the series, and really what this allows us to do is to create legacy resources, and people learn through the stories, and so our focus is on people and the stories behind the stories. And moving forward, we are committed to encouraging conversations about water reconciliation, because everybody can talk about water. And Michael Blackstock has had a profound influence on our thinking, and because he's part of the team. And he has taught us that interweaving of Indigenous knowledge and Western science transcends integration.
In the spirit of reconciliation, and with the emphasis on water reconciliation, the Watershed Moments team asks that the CVRD board chair send an invitation letter to First Nations in the Cowichan region on behalf of the partnership, referencing long-standing interregional collaboration and inviting participation in the Watershed Moments Symposia series. We have no preconceived notions about a specific date for the symposium, nor about the format. We are having these conversations to figure that out. 3 weeks ago, we met with the Cowichan Watershed Board. Michael Blackstock will meet with the Cowichan tribes on June 29th, and today we are having this conversation with you.
So in closing, and I do believe we're on time, Paul, I wish to share this quotable quote by Michael Blackstock. Interweaving is about creating a new form of knowledge through collaboration by interweaving useful threads from each way of knowing into a more robust way. We thank you for your time.
Thank you both for your presentation. And if we get the presentation lowered, I can see everybody. Thank you very much. And I do have a speakers list. I'll look to directors. I have Director Wilson, and we'll start there, and I'll watch for other hands. Director Wilson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that that presentation. It's very interesting, and one of the protection and sustainability of water resources and reconciliation of those in that context is a major priority of mine, and will continue to be so. And I particularly like your opening statement, and I'm going to go back to the presentation here, which says, by pulling the threads of understanding from the past through to the present and future, It would help communities achieve the vision of reconnecting people, fish, land, and altered landscapes. That really is a very, very telling statement. And thank you for getting for that one there. I fully understand. I greatly appreciate the need to protect this most precious commodity, not only from the wildlife or the indigenous and community inclusive community point of view and aspect. But can I ask if the organisation is involved in any way in the protection and the ongoing quality and quantity of the BC aquifers?
Through to our presenters.
The short answer, if I understand the question correctly, is no, because I'm not sure what you actually meant. But no, but I guess it's really our focus is really on working with local governments, and that's who we represent, and being that connection between provincial ministries and local governments to really advance the education and understanding of the science-based approaches to water sustainability, but also tempering it, and not just tempering it, but really bringing the human side into it. That's really what we're saying. And I can't believe I'm an engineer and just said that, but I mean that's where we're coming from, right? It's the human, it's the human side, and that's why Michael's work so resonates with us, because I think this in our society, and engineers especially, we have such a fixation on the numbers, but it's not about the numbers. It is the people, it is the stories, and maybe Paul might want to add to that.
Yeah, I want to say that our this organization, the partnership, may not be actively working on aquifer protection, but certainly our partners in that partnership are. So it's certainly a component piece of the conversations we have.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone else's hands? So I'll go to Director Smith. I was just going to say, I was sort of like, we've done this presentation, but it was at the Watershed Board. So thank you for bringing this to our board. Director Smith, please go ahead.
I'd like to thank Kim and Paul for their presentation today. I have had the opportunity of meeting with Kim at a symposium, I think at least 3 or 4 times for symposiums. He inspired me, he encouraged, the energy that he gives out and puts into our communities and into us as a local government is amazing, and I must thank him for that. I think part of my sitting here is thanks to you, so I just want to express that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to ask any questions or comments to our presenters? And we do have a further agenda item related to the ask, which we'll discuss shortly. But I wanted to thank you both for your presentation and all of your work. I think our board members who have spoken have said it well, and we'll have consideration of your request further in our agenda, but wanted to thank you and give you our best virtual clap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hopefully we can see each other in person not too distant in the future. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right, I'll let you do the technical aspect of moving our presenters out of the meeting into the lobby if they wish to remain. You don't have to stay, but please feel free if you wish. And I'll go over to you, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any report of the chair this afternoon?
Not today, no.
Then on to correspondence. Item C1 is correspondence from the Decibel Coalition with a request to join the coalition for direction.
Thank you. So I'll put this over to the directors. Director Morrison. You're still muted. Go ahead.
It's a 2-step process now. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've heard we all had the delegation before and have looked at the information that's contained in the correspondence. Talked to Ms. Legault, and I personally think this is a brilliant organization and laud what they're doing, and I'm supportive of what they're doing. But I also see the challenge we as a regional district as not only do we zone the surface of our lakes, but we also have noise bylaws and the likes, and also to the fact that we've had a little bit of a hand in drafting resolutions in the past. I not real comfortable with the documentation that they presented as far as a potential draft resolution. So I'd love to hear what the other directors are saying, but or would have to say. But I'd be inclined to refer this to staff for an appropriate, brief, and succinct resolution that we could perhaps support.
If that is a motion, I believe,
Sure.
Director Kuhn, were you seconding that? Or did you want to speak to it? You're seconding it? And I'll go to you next to speak to it.
No, I just wonder, is there any way for us to join this organization without any big bureaucracy or, I mean, I live at the lake, and ever since I've moved here, I've been fighting the loud boats. And that's why the Cowichan Lake and River Stewardship Society was actually started. It was started because of complaints that I got from so many residents complaining about the noisy boats. So if there's any way to join this organization and support them, I would be much in favor of that.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarity, did you second the motion then, or no? You were just speaking to it?
I forgot, what was the motion again?
Was to refer this to staff for a more succinct potential resolution that reflected, I believe. Well, Ms. Legault, what motion was put forward there?
To refer to staff for a revised resolution.
Thank you.
Well, I wonder, if we wanted to join the organization, do we have to refer back to staff? Can we do that here?
I would say that
I'm generally not in favor of ad hoc decisions, but I'm very much in favor of what they're doing.
Okay, I'm getting a long speakers list. Please hold your hands up. I have Director Yanni DiNardo, Director Nicholson, Director Wilson, Director Toporowski, I think I saw you as well. Anyone I've missed? It's longer than I thought we'd have on the item, so I think we're doing well. I'll leave it without a motion on the floor if that's okay for the board at this moment. We'll finish this discussion and then I'll come back to Director Morrison. Director Yanni DiNardo, then Nicholson, then Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment on this, which we struggle in all our areas. I know that I am the saltwater part with motorboats and freighters and noise. And in our community alone, there's just, it's an excess of noise all the way around and everything, the power equipment with people's lawns, all of that. But I absolutely agree that we should be advocates and helping. This is another level of government, but Transport Canada is the one that needs to hear from us on the issues that we have. This is not a jurisdiction that we own, but we can be advocates to move this forward. And I know this is not a proclamation, so I know we don't do proclamations, but we should really be moving this. It's about time. And I think with Director Kuhn, I think it's been years and years that they have talked about this. I know Shawnigan Lake for years, all the years that I've grown up here in Shawnigan Lake, even the motorboats, I mean, that's their drinking water. We talk about the dirty dirt. We talk about a lot of things with the water quality, and yet we have these great big boats, and they're just getting, just like our freighters in the ocean, they're getting larger and larger and noisier and noisier. So I can't see a problem. Their resolution is a rather lengthy one, but we're just here, we're just suggesting that we be advocates to move this forward, and they're doing a great job for us. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Director Nicholson and then Director Wilson.
Thank you. I think that this is a national coalition, and I think that they're doing the heavy work of trying to get the attention of the feds to change regulations to make it more workable. And so enforcement can happen, because apparently enforcement is one of the biggest issues here. I think that this is, they're just looking for numbers of people joining, and I do think it's an issue for us, and it's an issue that's only going to grow, and that this is a very easy way to get something off the ground when we have very limited capacity. And I certainly don't think wasting staff's time to craft another resolution is worthwhile. I think we should just jump on board and go with it. It's just adding our name to a list of people who and organizations that think that noisy boats on lakes are a problem.
Thank you. Director Wilson, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm totally in agreement with Director Nicholson here. I really don't see the point of referring something back to staff for yet another report. To me, this is fairly straightforward. They're asking for a letter of support, which I think we can make right here and now, given that the size perhaps of the organization. I have to ask though, there's a couple of things that have been coming up here: the length of time that this has been going on, the lack of action, the lack of policing. So really, how much difference is this going to make by joining in this coalition? If we can't do it on a local level, do you think anything is going to change by joining this coalition? I'll join it if it's going to do some good. I just need to know, how much difference is it going to make to a problem that's just been going on for so long?
Yeah, staff may want to weigh in, but I think in looking at it and referring to the previous delegation was that maybe by getting together and having many local governments as part of this effort, it might, allow Transport Canada to take action when it's less than, individual local governments sort of lobbying or advocating on behalf of the residents, that by forming a coalition, when we go to things like FCM or make requests of the federal or provincial governments, that we may have more strength. But I don't know if there's a member of staff that may be able to comment on it. And while I look to a member of staff,
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Crothers. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I wouldn't have said anything different than you did. That would be the benefit of this, would be simply a collective voice on an issue that's very complex and very challenging.
Thank you. I'll go to do you have a follow-up, Director Wilson?
Well, basically, yeah, as I say, I am in favour of joining this coalition, making sure that the strength in numbers. I'm just the question I'm trying to get clarity on: is this going to change anything?
I'm not sure if anyone has an official future predictor, but I don't think we know. I think I gave the best answer I can. But by joining the coalition, we may have more strength in numbers when advocating to the federal government or provincial government. I have Director Sebring next. I may entertain that we could do two things. One would be we could do a resolution to join the coalition without having to, necessarily adopt this long resolution. But I'll go to Director Sebring first, and then Director Martman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's kind of where I was going. I don't know that we need to send this back to staff, but equally the draft resolution that they presented to us is, I think, overly detailed. As far as I'm concerned, we don't need the whereas clauses. We don't use them in resolutions anyway. And the resolution as it's drafted commits us to do a couple of things in the last two bullets that I'm not sure we have either the desire, the capacity, or the necessity to do. And that would be to communicate about the Decibel Coalition to our community, encourage their support, and to encourage other government organizations to join. I'm not sure we want to commit to those two things, but the first two bullets in the draft resolution that they presented us, without all the whereas clauses, I would make a motion that the CBRD officially and publicly join as a member and support of the Decibel Coalition, and that we allow the Decibel Coalition to use our name and reference our membership in their communication with other government agencies and committees, other Decibel Coalition members, and promotion of the coalition's objectives in social media and the press. Period. Full stop. Just those two bullets. I'll make that a motion.
I just a point of process, Ms. Legault. I did give Director Morrison the courtesy of coming back to him for the motion, and it was kind of superseded by Director Sebring's motion.
Okay, fair enough. I'm sorry.
So I'll put you and Director Morrison near the end of the discussion, and maybe we can find an agreement on what the resolution will look like by the time we get there. Director Sebring, if you don't have a follow-up, I'll go to Director Martman, and then I saw a bunch of hands, but I think they may have been seconding your motion.
Yeah, I don't have a follow-up. I'm just trying to shortcut this system based on what we've heard. I don't think we need to send it back to staff, so I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I've got Director Martman next.
Thank you, Chair. I think Mayor Sebring is basically having a Vulcan mind meld with me, because that's exactly where I was going.
Okay, thank you. And while you guys are connected, we'll move on to someone else. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak on this before I come back to our two potential motions? Seeing none, I'll go to Director Morrison.
I'd be certainly willing to yield to a motion done on the fly, but Mr. Ellen Drinkwater contacted me yesterday, and I guess he's realizing that the wording in their draft resolution is somewhat unwieldy, and had suggested that they were simply looking for a resolution that supported the aims and objectives of the Decibel Coalition, and I'm very reluctant to have motions and resolutions crafted on the fly. So that was my purpose of relying on our professional staff for a resolution that's not going to get us into any hot water. So I'll yield at that. Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back to Director Sebring.
Then I'll make the motion as I outlined it earlier that we officially and publicly join as a member and allow the coalition to use our name and reference our membership, etc. The two bullets, the first two bullets in their draft resolution.
Thank you. And I saw several seconders. This time I saw Director Kuhn. Do we want to have further discussion on the motion? Any objections from staff? None? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you for that. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to committee and commission reports. Item CR1 is the report and recommendations of the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of June 16th.
Thank you. Director Yanni DiNardo, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move 1 through 5 first. So those are 5 grants and aid.
Thank you. I see seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Back to you, Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move 6 through 9, please. This is electoral area directors only. 6 through 9.
Seconded by Director Nicholson. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor, electoral area directors only. Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
That is my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Director Yanni DiNardo. Moving on to staff reports. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item SR1 is a staff report from Communications and Engagement regarding the 2020 annual report for information.
Thank you. That's for information. I'm not sure everyone's had an opportunity to review it. I want to say staff again, thank you. I don't believe it's actually a requirement for regional districts to do this, but I think it's always reflected well on good to give a status update to our communities. Do any of the directors have any questions or comments? Director Toporowski, and then Director Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank staff for the annual report. I just noticed, because I noticed spelling mistakes and stuff, so bear with me. On page 4, I just wanted to point out, it says the Penelakut tribe. It should just be Penelakut tribe. And page 10, the couch and weir design in 5 sentences up should read public instead of pubic. It's okay. MLA Bill Rutley made the same mistake in his letter once. And I think that was it for that. And I do have a note here, but I don't understand what my meaning was, but I'll have a look to see. I've got page 11 written down and I don't know why, but I'll go back to I'll let someone else speak.
I'll look for your hand as a follow-up after I go through the other speakers. Mr. Carruthers, can staff take those 2 notes and make those corrections? Especially on the second one and the first one, both very important. Thank you. I see Chris nodding. Sometimes you read it a few times, you start filling in letters and taking away stuff, and so thank you for that. I have Director Wilson next, then Morrison, then Martman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this I know it's not necessary for regional districts to do this, but it is a very, very good report, and it does get the message out to the community that exactly what this as an organisation is trying to do and is doing. So I'm a great believer in this report. I think it's very well done, and I look forward to seeing it continued. Thank you to all the staff that have been involved in producing this.
Thank you. Director Morrison, and then Director Martman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I might digress just a little bit. This is a great document and lots of financials in it and the likes. But one of the things for either Mr. Schumacher or Mr. Carruthers, this came up at a watershed stewardship meeting the other day about how we had the welcome to our regional district letters that were something that we had done. I think Mr. Carruthers had initiated this, and are we still engaged in that activity? Are we still doing that? Because we're finding the influx is there's great material in here that could be part of that, but are we still doing those electoral area specific welcome letters that might have some of this information in it?
Through to Mr. Carruthers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to the question, I can't honestly say if we are. I think that may have been something that we have maybe have gotten away from through COVID. I will check with staff and confirm. I know that we were regularly updating those letters and that they were being sent out to new property owners, but I will have to investigate it and follow up with you.
Okay, thank you. I have Director Martman next, and then I see Director Marsh.
Thank you, Chair. And I just following up on Director Toporowski, I just on page 4, I just had I sent this into Chris, but it's about vacant for Area H in 2020, and I became a director in 2020, so I'm not sure if vacant should be perhaps should be changed or not. So,
Mr. Schumacher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through to Director Martman. Rather than republishing the agenda again with that change, I was going to wait until we had the opportunity to present it to the board and then make that change that you had requested. And appreciate you pointing that out, Director Martman.
and just to follow up, I do somehow, I know the alternates aren't in here, but I somehow have Director or alternate Hain recognized for the work, if that's possible.
Thank you. Thank you. I see Mr. Schumacher nodding. I have Director Marsh next, and I think I saw Director Toporowski remembered page 11. And did I see Director Acton? Did I see your hand as well? No? Okay, thank you. And I would just say if there's some wordsmithing, we can always email those into Mr. Schumacher and he'll make those corrections rather than diving that deep in the meeting. But Director Marsh and then Director Toporowski. Sorry, Director Marsh, you're still muted. Can't get it unmuted? I'll go to Director Toporowski and then I'll come back to you if we can get that sorted out. Director Toporowski.
Thank you. I did have page 11 written down, but I think it was just towards the strategic plan adoption of the First Nations opportunity of reconciliation. And I think that was just something that's in our plan, but it doesn't really say what that is, but after reading it again, I get it.
Okay.
But I just wanted to thank staff again for this presentation and bringing this to us. And it's a wonderful report. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Marsh, I can come back to you.
Thank you. I'm having strange computer issues between two screens, but I just want to compliment the staff that had a participation in this. I know we heard it's not required, but if I was looking to come to live somewhere in the Cowichan Valley, I would find this document a very fulsome description of what to expect. And the photos are beautiful. And, you know, I don't know how it happened if we don't have to do it, but if staff felt they had the time, I actually think it is incredible talking about our strategic plan and service agreements and different things. I just think this is the kind of thing that businesses who are looking for a place to locate are always looking to know. And here we've got it in one document. So thank you to the staff for doing it.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone? Those items for information, no decisions required now. And staff, if you do notice anything, folks, when you read it through, please let Mr. Schumacher know right away, and he'll make it or explain why it was worded a certain way. But I appreciate all the oversight there, because many hands make light work, except for Mr. Schumacher. Mr. Schumacher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I so rarely get the opportunity to speak at your meetings. I just thought I would take an opportunity to reiterate your thanks to staff that contribute to making this annual report every year. We have goals to continue to improve our annual reporting. Obviously, this only captures a snapshot of some of the achievements of the organization in a year. It's hard to fit it all in there. There's a lot of work that happens outside of correlating the strategic plan in terms of regular operational milestones and things that I think we can continue to highlight and celebrate. And so I just give you the sense that next year we have some ideas for continuing to improve upon our annual reporting structure to give more highlights to some of the good work that we do throughout the year. And thank you again for your comments.
And thank you to you and all the staff that participated. I know it's a whole organization effort, so I appreciate that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item SR2 is a staff report from Environmental Services regarding the Partnership for Water Sustainability BC Blue Ecology Symposium, with a recommendation that the chair send a letter of invitation to each of the First Nations in the region to participate in the upcoming Blue Ecology Symposium on behalf of the CVRD and the Partnership for Water Sustainability BC.
Thank you. Moved by Director Morrison, seconded by Director Smith. Discussion? Ms. Miller, they did such a great job in their presentation. I don't think we need any further discussion, but I appreciate you and all the other members of the team, both at, all the organizations that have been participating. So I'm happy to sign on and send those letters, and reflects on a lot of priorities for the region that we just discussed in our annual report item. Seeing no questions, then it is on the floor. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Thanks, Ms. Miller and the team for being here for us if we had questions. All right, Ms. Legault, moving on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item SR3 is a report from the Inspection and Enforcement Division on the Soil Deposit Bylaw for information.
Thank you. So this is for information, and I know this has been discussed at length at electoral area services, including special meetings. And I just want to say to the members of the electoral areas, thank you for the hard work and staff. This has been a bit of a mountain, not of contaminated soil, hopefully, but definitely a mountain of work. But I'll go through, I think I saw Director Salmon first, and then Director Acton. Director Salmon, go ahead and I'll make a list, and then Director Nicholson.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to staff and Mr. McDonald for all their work on this. Only one thing I still have questions about. I'd be interested in hearing what others think. But the community consultation part, and Mr. Evans asked about it as an option. I'm just my instincts are to leave it in there as an option for Type C. Just I know how these things work over time, and the value of having a few key community members having a direct communication and connection with operators really has a long-term effect. So having that option in there, and I understand the reasons why we might not want to, possible delays, but only as an option. I think it would be valuable in thorny ones in future, and in a variety of cases, and just as we work for the public, I don't know, I'd hesitate to drop it out, and if we could put it in just as it was in the old bylaw under as part of section 14 without delaying things, I would really think that might be a good idea, but I'll leave it for others to comment on that.
Thank you, and I would go through to staff if you have any comment on that. My understanding is there is some challenge with creating an expectation that we may not be able to deliver on, in that once the permit application, much like a development permit, are met, that some of the feedback from the community, it might be just us explaining to them that that's kind of out of the bounds of the bylaw, but I don't know if staff can maybe illuminate me as a municipal member as to why that was removed.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So yeah, no, you've nailed it right on the head. So the criteria is outlaid in the bylaw. So if an application comes in and it meets all the criteria, it's not discretionary. So you could still do public consultation, but as you said, it may just delay the process or give the appearance that it's discretionary, but it's not.
And I'll go back to Director Salmon if you have a follow-up, and then I have Directors Acton, Nicholson, Sebring, and Kuhn. Director Salmon.
I fully understand it's not discretionary. I'm not going in the like bald faces is going to change something, but there's the subtler and more important aspects of communication that just the opportunity to speak and hear one another, and hear if the operators hear from the neighbors, certainly and the public feels heard by the operators. It's just the value going down the road, and Mr. Evans and crew have demonstrated that in the past, and in fact worked directly with some operators and improved things without even having to go to the formalities of what's in the bylaw. So again, as an option, it's not like we do it all the time. I don't think we actually did it at all so far with our bylaw, but it appeals to me.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I'll go to Director Acton, then Nicholson, then Sebring, then Kuhn. And if I've missed anyone, please feel free to put your hand up, or if staff has a comment. Ms. Chirolf, do you want to comment now before I move on? Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we, as staff, don't like to put things in bylaws that we can't follow through on, or provisions that we can't enforce. And we're directed early on that including the public consultation provision within the bylaw was problematic, because it places an expectation on the board that there will be public consultation. And it puts the board in an awkward situation, particularly with respect to a permit that is, as Mr. McDonald said, not discretionary. If the application meets the guidelines, the board is obligated to issue that permit. So I would strongly advise that you not include that provision in the bylaw.
Thank you. Now I'll go to Director Acton, and then Director Nicholson is after. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple questions. I just wanted to understand for the Type C, by reading the bylaw, will all Type C permits still come to the board? And I'd like to understand how the renewal of the permit, will renewals come to the board? And how do we, so I guess, how do we, what's the criteria around allowing a renewal if people have already met their allotted amount to the original permit?
Through, I believe, to Mr. McDonald.
Yes, probably the first question was around the Type C permit. I'm sorry, you can just repeat the first part, Director?
If they will all come to the board still.
Oh, yes, they will. And the renewal is a new section that we've added. So we're looking at how we could better utilize that. Now, at this point, I believe that just goes to the general manager, but that is something that could be changed to come to the board.
Well, I personally, for a site, a C permit, I think it should come to the board, unless staff has an indication as to why it shouldn't. But and I guess, are we able, are there restrictions on the amount? If someone has a permit, say for 200,000 tons, and then they ask for a renewal that is another 200,000 tons, are we obligated to grant that permit?
Through the chair, one that was for that amount would likely be a new permit. That would not be a renewal. Renewal would be more used for something, say like you said, that 200,000 that they didn't meet it within the allotted time. So we were going down to 2 years. So say in 2 years they only managed to put in 50,000. So they came looking to, so they would have all of their paperwork would all be in place. So that's what we felt in this case, that if it stayed with the same amount that was originally proposed, it might be something to extend the time.
Thank you.
So follow up, do we need some kind of wording in the bylaw then that says, you know, the manager can grant a renewal permit, but when it exceeds the original permit, it's to come back to the board? Or something to that point?
My suggestion would be that would just be, if they were going to go an amendment of that kind, that it would be a new permit. So and that would go through, a new permit would go through the board.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I just have a quick point of process question. Was this not all vetted through committee before coming to the board? It just seems like these are committee discussions about specifics on the bylaw before a draft bylaws for first, second, and third reading. I just was looking for clarity.
We didn't actually see it.
Sorry, that was
completed.
Oh, okay. Thank you. All right. Sorry, I would have thought that the draft bylaw went through committee first, but Mr. McDonald, you had your hand up again?
Sorry, I lost my train of thought as you changed on me there. So I had a point, but it's okay. I think I'll bring it up.
Okay. I'll go to Director Nicholson, and I can put people on a round two list. I have Directors Nicholson, Sebring, Kuhn, and Morrison. Director Nicholson's next.
Thank you. I have one question of my own, and then I'd like to get back to Director Salmon's point that he raised. And I'm sorry, my memory is not working at all today. I can't remember if we had agreed that we were going to carry on with a soil deposit review. I think that we did agree with that at committee, Mr. McDonald. Yeah. So I felt that Mr. Yearlink raised a number of important issues in his letter to us this week. So I would like to make sure that they get saved somewhere. And I was hoping that, and I was wondering when we would be able to see a terms of reference for this review to make sure that all the outstanding issues that we have with this bylaw can be looked at again. So, yeah, so I was wondering what a timeline would be on that. And I think it's really important that the community is consulted on a subsequent review and that we do it properly and thoroughly. But I am very pleased to see this moving forward to fix some of the more egregious problems.
Through to staff.
Through Mr. Chair, because that actually jogged my memory on what I was going to speak of earlier. The bylaw is actually it's a living document, so it will always change as needs require. So we needed to get this forward because there was a high demand from directors to have change to the existing bylaw. So as we go forward, it'll always be under review. As far as a major review, we would have to look into the next few months. It's likely not something that's going to be before the fall, but depending on direction given to staff, that would probably be the best timeline I could give at this point.
Thank you. Follow up.
Okay, so then let me get back to Director Salmon's comment. I'm very sympathetic with what he has raised. You know, we have advisory planning commissions that look at development permits all the time, and they're not discretionary if the applicant meets all the issues. But what it is really important, I find, is for applicants to hear communities' concerns. And it also is an opportunity for the directors to understand what the community is thinking and where they're going. And so I'm wondering if there is a sort of and we know we've got people that are really super interested in getting the soil deposit thing right. I'm wondering if it would be worth setting up an advisory planning or advisory soil deposit commission, or using the South End APC to provide advice and review the letter C deposits applications. Is there some way we could do that would allow for some community input and then also allow us to manage expectations?
Through to staff.
So, Mr. Chair, for the same reason that staff are recommending that we take the consultation provisions out of this bylaw, that would be the same reasons I would argue against having a commission set up. These are permits. They're not rezoning bylaws. Those types of land use decisions are discretionary, and there's room for public input and for the board to make decisions based on public input. These are permits. They're prescribed permits. If the applicant meets the criteria, they are required to be issued the permit. So to involve a commission to review these is just setting up a false expectation, and I believe would be ultra vires to the bylaw.
Follow up.
I don't intend to have an argument here, but I have to say that my experience is a second set of eyes from the community can be helpful. And it's certainly quite possible to manage the expectation that we have to issue a permit if they meet but it's an opportunity to flag issues that we can maybe deal with at a later date. And I feel very uncomfortable about this because these are large industrial projects without the community having much say at this point.
Thank you. And I can always go back to round two speakers. I've got Director Sebring next, then Kuhn, Morrison, and Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, I totally support what staff is trying to do here in terms of embedding a CVRD-driven consultation process into the bylaw. It sets up the false expectations. Either the permit meets the criteria or it doesn't. To get to what Director Nicholson was saying, and I'm just looking in my municipal experience, is there perhaps another way to do this? To say, as a condition of applying for your permit, you have to show us that you have notified and consulted with neighbors in a 500 meter or 800 meter or 1200 meter radius or something like that. Maybe it's in there. I don't know. I haven't read it in that great a detail. But so that we embed some engagement into the process of applying for the permit, rather than you apply for the permit, now we go to the public and say, what do you think? I mean, we do that municipally with stuff like ALR exclusion applications, rezonings. You know, we just make it part of the process. When you come to make that application, you have to show that you've gone to the community and you show us what the feedback was in the community context. And, you know, whether or not that feedback is positive or negative, at least we have facilitated a dialogue between the proponent and the potential neighbors of this thing. I guess I'd go to Mr. Carruthers. Might that be a way to do it? Is that already envisioned here? Because community consultation with the board, you're right, that's not on. Because it sets up false expectations of, well, you guys weren't listening to us. We said don't do it. We don't have a choice if it meets the criteria. But can we make engagement part of the criteria?
Through to staff, Mr. Carruthers.
You know, I believe, Mr. Chair, that you could. Again, it's then you start to get into an issue of what is adequate engagement. And then you're going to be having to get into a situation of prescribing what that engagement looks like, because everybody is going to take on a different view of what engagement is. You know, we look at these soil permits just as we would look at waste stream management licensing permits, just like we would look at development permits. They're all set up the same way. The consultation is when you develop the bylaw, and you address those issues in the bylaw. in terms of what should be in the bylaw. When it comes to adjudicating each application, that becomes a very technical exercise that doesn't involve discretion and consultation. And so, my suggestion, and we've done, as was noted earlier, I mean, we've had a lot of input into this bylaw, and it's been amended to address a significant amount of input that we've received from the community about their concerns. Adding another layer of consultation to a permit, I believe, is problematic, as General Manager Churl said earlier. Anything's possible, and my only caution would be that if you're expecting the proponent to take on consultation, I can assure you that there will have to be some amount of prescription provided, so that everybody understands what that consultation looks like. And now you're getting into, again, raising expectations, and so I believe it's going to get complicated if you do that.
All right. I just trying to find a solution here, because I agree with what staff has done here, but at the same time, I hear what Director Salmon is saying, and some others, in terms of trying to find a way to facilitate communication between the proponent and the potential neighbors of this thing. And I'm just trying to figure out a way to do that. I see Mr. Rolfe wants to weigh in, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Rolfe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there is a public notice provision within the bylaw 14.1, which says that upon submission of an application for type C permit, the applicant's required to publish a notice in 2 consecutive issues of the paper with information about the proposed soil deposit. So there is a notice or notification to the public that permit has been applied for, and through that, potentially there's an avenue for the public to address the board should they see fit. But this is, a fairly strong departure from public consultation.
Well, fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Director Kuhn, you're next, and then Morrison, Marsh, and Martman.
My feeling is that we just keep opening a can of worms here. The local residents wanted a bylaw for soil deposits. So the bylaw exists, and there are legal proceedings. If we start kind of cutting corners on the bylaw and trying to accommodate this and accommodate that, all we're doing is opening ourselves up for any legal squabble that comes along, and we don't need that. There was so much input given into the creation of this bylaw. To keep now chiseling away on it because somebody has another idea and maybe we should consult, and yet if we do allow consultants consulting the public to be consulted, there's nothing but raising expectations that that they might have an input then, and they will not have an input. There can't be a legal input. The bylaw exists and the regulations are there. If we should get away from this trying to desperately kind of cooperate with the public in a way. What about if we do it on this side? What about building permits? What about anything else? Once decisions are before the board, oh no, we'll have to go back to the public, or we should consult. It's going to be a never-ending problem, and as I've always said, we are here to make decisions. So let's make decisions. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Thank you, Director Kuhn. Director Morrison, then Marsh, then Martman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to go in a little different vein here, and but I do agree with some of what my colleagues from across the lake has said, that, and I'm sure Director Yanni DiNardo would agree that in the time that we've been here, there has been an awful lot of energy and attention put to this, and rightly so. There's been issues. We get this, and we and our staff and our legal people have put huge amounts of effort and energy into doing the best that we can on this, and it still uses huge amounts of resources within our organization. And that brings me to the concern that I had and that I read in the report, and I know it was mentioned in committee, is I'm reading here under financial considerations, and it says the budget, and I know budget 328 is quite healthy right now, but it says the budget for function 328 is primarily funded by requisition soil deposit permit fees. And with this new bylaw and restrictions, the fees collected could be impacted, but like reduced by up to 75%. So is there someone from finance or perhaps Mr. McDonald that can give us some indication whether we are at risk of potentially having to increase requisitions if we have a dramatic drop in fees to that extent? Because you know, the time and resources is one thing, but if we are all going to have to start ponying up for the level of enforcement and monitoring that the community has grown accustomed to, I think we should all be aware of that going in. So do we have any idea if we're at risk of this not being covered by the fees that we've been used to collecting thus far?
Well, it is through to staff. Whoever
I'm
wants
not sure
to
if anybody from finance is here, so I will field that question. Yes, it definitely runs the risk of asking for increased requisition because there are quite a number of sites right now, but this will reduce. And this was another point I wanted to bring up, that there's a lot of debate over these type Cs, but going forward with the very limited amount of areas that type Cs will be permitted, it's not likely we would see very many type C permits. Therefore, it would have an extreme financial impact, and that's why up to 75%.
follow-up. Okay, I've got a round 2 list started. I have Director Marsh and then Martman on round 1.
I'm also on round 1 on this item, Mr. Chair.
I just said it was you were next. Yes.
Yeah, now I get what you're saying. This has been a really confusing debate because it seems like it's just going around in all these different places, but you know, it's been, I don't even remember a time when 3 separate staff warned the board about the same thing, and one of those staff did it twice, and the board wouldn't take that advice. And also, you know, that's how bylaws work. That's why we have staff. If the proponent meets the requirements of the bylaw, and we hold a public hearing and 75 people show up and say, we don't want this, we don't want this, we don't have a choice but to accept it if we've passed the bylaw. And then the board is going to wear it and the district is going to wear it because most of those people won't even particularly understand. But I do understand why it's raised a lot of concern at the table because of the problems with Shawnigan. But my understanding is that this had a lot of public input, and this is where I feel at a bit of a loss because I'm, you know, I wasn't part of that. I'm a municipal director, but I understand that the public has had their input into this. So I would suggest that if the board isn't prepared to treat it as a bylaw as written, then they need to refer it back and put in what they need to feel comfortable doing that. Because, you know, I would be some PO'd if it was me, and I went to a meeting and waited in line for an hour and a half and listened to everybody, and in the end was told, well, thanks for telling us, but actually we can't do what you're saying because this application fits the bylaw. So the false expectations, you know, like that's the kind of like bad news stories, they spread and they last a really, really long time. So I do not support, do I vote? I vote on this, right?
Yes, this is a bylaw. I believe it's for all directors.
Yeah, I don't support adding public input, but I would say that the public that seem to be concerned about it are reading all the agendas, and they could write they could write their input. And if it happened to be something that was missed, I imagine the board would have recourse, because they'd have until from Friday till Wednesday or whatever that came. But I just think it's a slippery slope and would undermine what I would hope to be a new era of good communication with the public across the whole region. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
But I'll just end with saying I do acknowledge how stressful this must be for electoral area directors after what happened out at Shawnigan.
Thank you. Director Martman, you're next.
And I'd like to thank thanks Chair. I'd like to thank Director Marsh for her comments, because I sort of build off of them. And I do really recognize how important public consultation is. And then I recognize staff, on the other hand, saying, how this complicates things and their expertise. And I guess I want to just bring up what I felt or the changes that occurred at committee that maybe not aware of to all the board members here, is that it was at first drafted so site or C licenses weren't going to, or C permits weren't going to go to the board at all. And so they were going to be approved through the general manager. And then at committee, it was said, well, no, that's not the direction we want it to go forward with. And it came back with, okay, these will come to the board. And in my mind, that created the public information piece, that people that are concerned and aware can speak up, can write in, can provide information when the agenda item comes forward. And I think from my perspective, I would say that that's the public piece that I wanted to hear from. That's the public piece I want to hear about. So it will also give me knowledge to ask staff questions, because it's a very expert group of people out there in the public. So where the public consultation piece comes in beyond that, I think it's going to really just replicate what information we can get, and in the way it's set up now. So that's how I see it. You're muted.
Thank you. I muted myself before I spoke. Round two, I'm moving on to Director Salmon. Any others for round two? Mr. McDonald, you can comment first, and then I'll go to Director Salmon.
Yeah, no, I just, through you, Mr. Chair, I just, to Director Acton, I just wanted to clarify something. I apologize it's been a lot of changes in this bylaw, and I've tried to memorize as much of it as I can without going to the notes. A renewal for a type C actually is through the board. It is not through the GM. So I just wanted to clarify that, because it was a question asked earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Now back to Director Salmon, and I did see Director Acton's hand, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I got Director Acton after Director Salmon. Director Salmon, go ahead.
Yeah, good. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for your input. I can accept it, and I will be supporting this bylaw. Thanks again to staff.
Thank you. Director Acton, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to thank staff. I think, we had a pretty solid bylaw before, but now it will be even that much more tuned up. And I don't feel any fear about the fees decreasing, because as Mr. McDonald mentioned, there'll be less large sites to monitor, therefore perhaps less work for staff in the end as well. So yeah, I think all the changes are good. I look forward to, all the applications that keep coming to the board, and we'll be able to see if there's anything else that needs to be just tweaked. So I appreciate everyone's work on this. And to the rest of the directors, we did not see this final bylaw written. So that's why this has taken a bit of time. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I have Director Salmon for round three. Anybody for round two first? Oh, Director Topper. Sorry, Director. Yeah. Oh, sorry, Director Salmon. I'll give it to you, and then I'll go to Director Toporowski. I'm sorry if I didn't give you a follow-up.
Just when will this come for adoption?
I'd put that through to staff. If we do first, second, and third today, would it be on our next board agenda?
Yes, it would.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Chair. It was just more of a comment from our public input from Cliff Evans. He mentioned 8.5G, and it was about the soil on roads, on public roads, and being cleaned up. I'm happy to see that in this bylaw because in Cowichan Tribes we have some of our members who lease out their land to farmers, and we have such a bylaw in place for our roads, and it's only because sometimes some of them have manure, some of them have soil that just dumps out of the truck, and it's up to the person that's transporting the materials on our roads to clean those up. So I just wanted to comment on that because I know, like Councillor Marsh said, we weren't in that process of looking at being involved in those meetings too. So, and I know this has been a really long thing, but I think, going in the right direction of supporting such a bylaw and amending as we go along, and it's a move in the right direction. So I just wanted to add that. Thanks.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone on the discussion? There's no motion required for this. It's coming up very shortly. I think it's our next item for under bylaws. So seeing no further discussion, I'll go back to you, Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On to bylaws item B1, CBRD bylaw 4380, soil deposit bylaw 2021 for first, second, and third readings.
Moved by Director Salmon, seconded by Director Sebring. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. CBRD bylaw 4386, sewer systems management amendment bylaw 2021 for first, second, and third readings.
Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. CBRD bylaw 4386, sewer system management amendment bylaw 2021 for adoption.
Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Sebring. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault.
So on to unfinished business. Item UB1 was referred from the June 9th board meeting. Recommendation from the Regional Services Committee on the Cowichan Valley Trail roadside trail connection.
Thank you. Before we get into that, thank you, Mr. Farquhar, for joining us today. Is anybody wanting a break? I know we're up on an hour and a half, so we'll take a 10-minute break because I think these may be longer discussions than they look on paper. So we'll take 10 minutes. We'll be back at 3:05 sharp, please. Thank you.
The video is live.
Thank you very much. I think we have everyone back other than Directors Acton and Staples. I will start the speakers list. I have Director Smith first. I'll put myself in there somewhere. And While we're waiting for directors Acton, I'll go. I don't want to start the discussion without all directors present, just in case they want to add to the discussion, but we'll just hang on for another moment. And Mr. Farquhar, thank you for joining us. You weren't at our last meeting, so hence much of what we were discussing may be able to be answered by you. I'm just waiting for Director Acton, Mr. Farquhar, just so that we can have the whole board present for the discussion. So I'll go to you if you'd like to reintroduce this item, and then I'll go to Director Smith, who's first on the list. We have everyone here now. Go ahead, Mr. Farquhar.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And for the benefit of the board, I did take the opportunity to review the last meeting. So I have a sense of some of the issues or concerns that were raised in the meeting. So if it's a benefit to the board, maybe I could just summarize a few things that might touch on some of the questions that directors have, and otherwise might give some clarity in terms of what this project entails. At the end of the day, this is about connecting the existing Cowichan Valley Trail between Chemainus and Saltaire with the existing trail designated through the town of Ladysmith. And in working through options, we knew very early on when we actually entered into an agreement with the Island Corridor Foundation back in 2009 that there would be sections of the rail corridor that due to terrain, narrowing of the corridor, and other factors would be very limiting or prohibitive to allowing for development of a rail with trail. And certainly one of those sections was from the north end of Saltaire through into the Transfer Beach area of Ladysmith. It's complicated because the fact portions of the actual corridor width narrow. We've got the Trans-Canada Highway to the west, and we've got Chemainus Road and some residential development tucked in along the east side. And we've got a fairly significant downslope where the rail corridor or the tracks themselves are basically built up. And there's not lands along either side within the corridor, similar to lands along the corridor south in Saltaire and Chemainus, that allow for building of a trail on the side slope because it's quite steep. So these have been limiting factors that the regional district has known for a number of years. So the resolve has been to identify how to connect from where the trail currently ends, the rail width trail at just south of North Watts Road, into the town of Ladysmith. And in looking at the options, we're pretty limited to doing a roadside pathway at this time along Chemainus Road. And the roadside pathway would be a separated pathway, similar to what the CVRD has developed already and maintains in places like Cowichan Bay along Wilmont Road, or our Hammond Way Trail along Eros Road in Cobble Hill. So this is not a trail or a pathway right along the road edge. It's actually set back a fair ways. So there's a separation between the pathway and where the field of travel is for cars on the paved road surface. And this would be the same approach for the section from the North Watts Road area all the way up into Ladysmith, where the current asphalt pathway on the east side of Chemainus Road exists within the town. The other point to clarify is that in working with an engineer in terms of doing some initial assessment and some initial review with the Ministry of Transportation, a crosswalk location would not be right at North Watts Road, because I know some concerns were expressed about there's a bit of a curve there and there's a bit of a rise coming up Chemainus Road from the south. What's been identified is actually farther north, about 300 plus feet, where Sky Road is. It goes off into a little residential development as a more appropriate location for establishment of a sidewalk crossing from the west side to the east side. And the Ministry of Transportation staff at this point in time seem favorable to that. So overall, the pathway would be extended from where it currently exists south of North Watts Road up to the approximate location of where Sky Road is on the east side of Chemainus Road for a crosswalk of that location. And north of that, within the rail corridor, would be development of the paved or the parking lot area, gravel parking area. And then the pathway itself would carry up along the east side of Chemainus Road, linking up with the paved pathway within the town of Lake Cowichan. So questions were raised about why not just graveling the tracks for now. Well, the the current tracks are part of an active railway, and you just can't put gravel over top of an active railway. I have been in discussions with the CAO, with the Island Corridor Foundation over the last week and a half, and they do have use of that tracks taking place right now on occasion. Most recently, they've been doing some brushing along there with a specialized piece of equipment that travels the length of the tracks, doing brushing on both sides to maintain the integrity of the rail in anticipation of moving back into full rail service as the intention stands right now. So it's an active railway. We can't otherwise put another use on top of the tracks. So that is certainly not an option for the regional district to be considering. And we're also guided by what was put together between regional districts along the length of the rail corridor and Island Corridor Foundation back in 2009. That's inclusive of Capital Regional District, Nanaimo Regional District, Mohawks Valley Regional District, and Alberni-Clyquet Regional District that establishes criteria, basically standards for developing rail with trail. And there are separation from centerline of track requirements to do with everything from safety in terms of rail service next to a pathway to crossing locations when approaching roads or wishing to cross the tracks from one side to the other. So all these have been also factored into the limitations that we face in terms of extending a rail with trail north of North Watts Road up into the town of Ladysmith. So, Mr. Chair, that's the summary I have at this time. So the staff report before the board is for consideration in terms of funding to complete the connection, inclusive of a gravel parking area that would be inclusive of some grant funds from the Trans-Canada Trail Foundation as outlined in the staff report.
Thank you very much. You covered off most of what I was going to say, so I may not need to speak now. Director Smith, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate, through the chair, to Mr. Farquhar, this is an area that is definitely through Saltaire, and it has lots of impacts, but it has impacts that I would like to make sure that before we make this decision, that some of the things that we look at, we had the active transportation strategy come before us this morning, and I'm just going to read a few points from it. And it said, better provide for people of all ages and abilities, and that more accessible, convenient, and efficient. This will provide specific work towards improving active transportation, walking, cycling, rolling infrastructure to provide improved transportation options for people throughout the CVRD. Development and maintaining an interregional transportation system that effectively and safely facilitates the movement of people and goods. The trail is for many years to come, and mobility choice is informed by convenience, time, beauty, enjoyment, health, and access. My big concern is when the trail hits the town of Ladysmith boundary and moving on to the sidewalk, you are right beside the traffic. You have 22 parcels that have that their parking is right there on almost right on the sidewalk. You have at least 4 roads entering. And the other day I spent time walking on the train tracks from North Watts Road to the Coronation Square connection. And the feel of walking within a forested area represents our communities and the Cowichan Valley. It's peaceful. You aren't constantly looking around for, is that car, backing out of their driveway. It's a different level of feeling. And so when we're looking towards building this trail, I think it's really important that we also look at that. And if we're looking for mobility, try putting something that's level or a slight slope is much easier for someone who has mobility issues than it is for them to walk along on the sidewalk. And even when you walk along the sidewalk, you get part of the way along, and then all of a sudden you need to cross over at Gill Road into the other side. So you actually come right back up to where the train tracks are. I think it would be beneficial for us as directors to actually walk that trail along the island, along the train tracks, and then also walk it along the um, town of Ladysmith sidewalk, and think of the enjoyment in the differences. And there may be some architectural challenges between North Watts Road and the Coronation Square intersection, but I think that we should take a moment, all take a look, and then come back to the table and revisit this conversation. And graveling, I think that Island Corridor Foundation, it is part of our neighborhood. And as part of our neighborhood, it would be appreciated if they agreed to look at the possibility of graveling the tracks at this time. It would make connection within the communities. I see north of Ladysmith, the Stamanis group would be able to also walk safely to Ladysmith. And, you know, the Transfer Beach area definitely has some challenges, but all challenges can be looked at as a yes possibility instead of a no possibility. We need to figure out how at some point we can actually get to yes on a lot of these items that we're looking at when we're looking at active transportation. And this is making it enjoyable. Anyhow, I'll let the next person speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm next. I haven't, if I missed any other hands, but I do want to comment because I agree with all the sentiments of what Director Smith said. But I also know the engineering challenges that are very real and did some review on why the roadside pathway was put from the proximity of Ladysmith and across the highway, then paved pathways down and separated from the highway up through Bayview Avenue, including separated bicycle lanes through the town of Ladysmith, and then reconnecting with the Trans-Canada Trail, which is the route that our Cowichan Valley Trail system also navigates. The part of Trans-Canada Trail, part of the Cowichan Valley Trail are one and the same. And that decision was made based on a lot of engineering work back when Chemainus Road was upgraded, and it was recognized that from an engineering perspective and a safety perspective that using the rail corridor was not feasible. So there has been significant review and re-review of the possibility of using the rail corridor through that section. And although it's not what I would prefer to see either, it's also the art of what is possible. Talking about what we're talking about, graveling the tracks, for example, doesn't provide the width needed to allow bicycles or pedestrians to pass in both directions, and is also deemed unsafe. And under the Trans-Canada Trail parameters, wouldn't be acceptable either. I absolutely agree with the sentiments that Director Smith brings forward, but I also cede to the realities of what is actually possible. I'm thankful staff brought forward that the crossing would be near Sky Road. And we can decide to delay this and lose the funding that's been granted for the parking lot and leave the present state there for an indeterminate amount of time. But if the only alternative is that we use the rail corridor, this connection won't be happening within the near term, if in the midterm as well. So I'll leave it at that. I don't think I can say more than what Mr. Farquhar said. I recognize that staff researched it to the ends of what is possible. And so although I'm not super excited about this section of the trail, as I'm not super excited about the roadside pathway through that narrow corridor area going into the town of Ladysmith, I also recognize that through a lot of work over many years, it is what is possible. And so I will support the recommendation from staff. I next have Director Salmon.
Thank you. So I just was curious, so I understand, so this will be a paved, not paved, sorry, separated roadside path as opposed to the section of Chemainus Road in Ladysmith, which is a paved shoulder. Is that correct? This will be separated?
It's not a paved shoulder. It's there's a curb and then there's a 2-lane paved pathway with a separated a bicycle lane and a walking path. And it is understood that if people come in opposite directions that they have to kind of deviate from the path, but it is a paved pathway starting at the boundary of Ladysmith.
Yeah, I was going to call it a paved sidewalk, but not quite. But we have more room, is that right? That's why we can do it fully separated in this case?
Mr. Chair, through to Director Salmon, yes, there's more room available on the shoulder to allow us to fully separate a gravel pathway, similar to what's being considered along Mill Bay Road for the eastern section.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I guess it's the municipal setbacks when they widened Chemainus Road, did that realignment and stuff through there with the big retaining wall. There was only enough room for an elevated with a curb, but not sufficiently separated from the roadway. But that's why the path is what it is. It goes to the boundary line of the private properties.
Thank you.
All right. Do I have anyone I've missed on my speakers list? Director Martman.
Hi, well, yeah, I think Director Morrison, thanks, Chair. Director Morrison mentioned even having a shoulder would be nice. And I echo that from Area H perspective. I was curious over to staff though, or maybe Chair Stone, are there any areas of the train or rail that has been graveled over?
In the island,
Victoria
not that I'm aware of, no.
So that would be a new ask to the Island Corridor Foundation, would it?
Yeah, and I'll go through to Mr. Farquhar.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, for clarity, the ask can be made, but the answer has already been given, which is no. It's an active rail line. There is no provision, no ability to approve graveling even a short portion of it because basically you've broken the link for the entirety of the rail corridor, and it's an active line that still has function and use.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, in September there's a planned excursion on the island in late September. So you can imagine if we graveled in between, even if the train or other maintenance gear could travel down the tracks with the gravel there, you have people walking down the tracks in an oncoming train that introduces a bit of a challenge. So whether the frequency of the trains is more than a few times a year in the short term, you can't take the risk of having people cycling or walking down the railway tracks when a train comes down the tracks.
Right. And so just to follow up, Chair?
Yep.
So I guess from my perspective, when I look at this, there's always a right time and right place for projects. And maybe one day there will be a time and right place for the rail, but I don't think this is the right time. So, I think you end up having to go back to what is the right time and right place for projects. And this one today, I think staff has brought back what is going to be possible.
Thank you. Director Morrison.
Before I comment, has there been a motion on the floor yet?
No.
So if I may, this is really starting to feel like, are we going to make a bunch of good decisions or a very few perfect decisions? And talk about the Vulcan mine melt with Director Martman there. I think that this may not be a perfect decision, but it's a good one given the circumstances now. And with that, I would be more than willing to move the staff recommendation listed in the agenda.
Thank you. And seconded by Director Kuhn. Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And oppose? I would like to oppose it out of protest, and just to be clear, Director Smith, I think she knows that I share the desire, and we'll continue to work on it, but this is a good mitigative measure in the short term. And I'll go to Director Smith for final comment.
First, I'd like to thank staff and the work that they have done on this. I know that I brought it forward for funding in our budget for 2021, and I appreciate the support from the other directors. It is a regional trail, and it doesn't just belong to Saltaire. I know we'd like to take ownership, but we do share it with all of you, and I appreciate all the input from the other directors, and I totally look forward to the use of it as I cycle my way into Ladysmith to do my Ladysmith shopping, and as I cycle into Chemainus to do my Chemainus shopping. So I divide my time. I'm sorry, you know.
Yeah,
Anyhow, thank you everyone for working towards this as a positive outcome for our communities so that we can keep the people safe and active and go under our strategic plan of well-being for our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. That takes us, I believe, Ms. Legault, to UB2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, UB2 is a UBCM resolution on grant program flexibility, and the resolution is available for the board's consideration.
Thank you. I'll go to Director Marsh first.
I'd like to move it. Do I need to read it, Ms. Legault, or do you?
Seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. And if you'd like to speak to it, I don't believe we need to read it out. It is in the agenda package there. But if you would like to make any comment, I'll go to you first, and then Director Yanni DiNardo, I think, wanted to speak to it as well.
Well, I just think it's a brilliant idea, and I hope it passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a machine in the background. Sorry, I opened my window because it was so hot in the room, and now a chainsaw happens to go. So I hope you hear me okay.
Oh,
I'm just in favor of this because of the frustration in which I have been speaking to for years on grants and how frustrating they are for all of us. So I'm happy to see this and support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? Thank you to staff for the succinct and thoughtful resolution. I'll put forward the question to the board. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Ms. Legault, moving on to UB3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this is a UBCM resolution on acceptance of regional growth strategy.
Thank you. You can see the resolution there. If there's any conversation, I'm willing to entertain it, or if a mover for the motion. Is that a move by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Staples? And any discussion? Director Morrison, go ahead.
So I think this has a really excellent intent, especially with the example that was used, and Ladysmith, you know, as not even an afterthought in this process. But I don't know if this would be a question through to staff, but you know, obviously the neighboring electoral areas would be considered in that discussion. But if there's a referral through a regional growth strategy, is it? We don't get many of these, so I'm wondering if there's the if our process is that we will go to electoral areas to initially consider the referral that's been made to us, or is it because it's a regional issue, it goes to regional services? Is there an opportunity for a deeper dive at the electoral area level when it comes to the process around these?
Mr. Crothers?
Yeah, I mean, Ms. Charles can weigh in if she so chooses. I don't believe we need to. I think the issue is an anomaly with municipalities. It comes to the regional district, and we have the opportunity for the electoral areas to comment. This was a unique situation, given the airport and the broad-ranging impact that airport has. But I think the electoral areas are well taken care of in this process.
Thank you. Ms. Charles?
Yeah, further to that, my understanding is that on the RGS referral, the referrals to the regional district, not municipalities within the regional district, and that's what this resolution would be asking for. So, you know, having the referrals just handled by electoral area services doesn't necessarily address the concern of municipalities within the regional district not having a say on the referral matter.
Thank you. Director Sebring is next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at this resolution. We all know the history here, and it's about the airport and primarily Ladysmith and to some degree Chemainus and North Cowichan. But if I'm a UBCM delegate from Fort St. John and I'm reading this and I don't have that background, the resolution doesn't really have much impact. You know, I mean, it's probably too late to wordsmith it now, but I just, you know, I mean, politically speaking, when this hits the floor, I hope that some of us are willing to speak to it and actually cite the example without criticizing the NRD, but just saying, look, this is what we've run into, because it's not really clear from the resolution what it is we're talking about, unless you actually know what it is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Carruthers?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. There is an accompanying backgrounder that goes with this, so it does provide some context for the reader.
Okay, thank
And
you.
I would expect that someone would speak to it on the floor.
Okay, thanks.
That's you and me, Al, and everyone else on this board at the right opportunity.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to be at UBC this year. I'm not a big fan of virtual conferences, but we'll see.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? It has been moved and seconded. Ms. Legault? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the question. All those in favor? And any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries. Mr. Carruthers, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify, if you recall, when this matter came forward from Regional Services, there was another resolution that the committee had recommended, and that was around community works funding and requesting that there be more flexibility attached to the three various streams of community works funding, as we have to expend them all by 2024. As we started doing research to develop that resolution, we realized it really wasn't such an issue. And so I made an executive decision to not move forward with that resolution, because it was not necessarily warranted.
Okay, thank you. All right. All right, then Ms. Legault, if I'm reading things correctly and not trying to skip to the end, I think we're at question period. So we will take a short recess. If we can be back at 3:43. If we got a quorum back here, we can continue with question period. Thank you all very much. It's a reminder for folks to mute your microphones.
Video's live.
Ms. Legault, are we running?
The video's live.
Oh, my apologies. I can't hear you, so I think, can you say it now, please? Okay, I got it. Sorry, I had some sound issues there for a sec. All right, we are in question period. I believe that I can see our first question period attendee at the moment, Ms. Legault.
Mr. Evans is joining us for question period.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I believe I heard the CAO say this afternoon that the public consultation should take place not in the permit, but in the making of the permit. Mr. Chair, is that not what we're doing today?
Sorry, I think the comment was that in the drafting of the bylaw, so that public input was gathered and received and incorporated into the framework of the bylaw. So I think you obviously paid attention to the conversation, and we heard the concerns of staff and some board members on both sides of the engagement piece. But in terms of the comments, I believe it was in the framing and redrafting of the bylaw.
So, Mr. Chair, on 4380, it looks like there's a few questionable pieces of legislation there. So I mentioned in 8.1G of the draft bylaw 4380 that the MOTI has a jurisdiction over the road.
Yep.
So is any direction going to be given to the bylaw enforcement department to amend this perhaps before it goes to board?
So I believe, and I'll answer this to the best of my ability, but although the road is owned by the Ministry of Transportation, because there is a deposit of soil, and the deposit of soil may result in debris and or soil and or et cetera. I'm paraphrasing. Deposited on the road in coming or going to the site, that they can require under the permit guidelines the requirement to clean up any mess that's deposited on the provincial roads. That's my understanding, but if that's incorrect, I'll follow up with staff.
Mr. Chair, I had an experience with reporting a load of clay dumped on Goldstream Heights, and I reported it to the Highways Department. They came and cleaned it up, and the Ministry of Transport phoned me up and wanted to know why I didn't tell them, because they have to know what's happening in situations like this. For one, safety. Two, was the load contaminated? Three, was there something wrong with the truck? But they wanted to be informed. And I was told, no ifs and buts, that if I report something again that's on the road, that it goes through MOTI as well as the Department of Highways and CON. So it seems to me that if there's debris going on the road that can endanger the safety of the people, of the public, then we shouldn't be giving orders for some person to clean it up.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got a note here to follow up with staff, and I will ask staff to give you an email to maybe, I think we're kind of talking about two different things perhaps. We're talking about sort of dirt and stuff deposited on the roadway coming or going from a fill site and making a requirement of the permit that if any of that is done. Now, when you're talking about something like obstructions on the road that would cause health and safety issues, anybody who sees something on a roadway should definitely report it to the ministry and or the provider of services in that area, if it's MCON or a main road in your area. But I think that we're kind of talking about nuanced two different things here, where a soil deposit site that is basically dirtying up the roads with their comings and goings, they would be responsible for the cleanup and the costs associated with that. But I'll commit to following up with staff. I've made a note, and I'll ask Mr. McDonald to provide us some information to maybe clarify that piece.
And also, I believe
I'll give you one more. I just I note that we don't get into debates with questioners, but I'll try my best to answer another question.
I believe that there were some other things pointed out in a letter to the board from Mr. Erling, and I just wonder if these could be looked into too before the bylaw goes for adoption.
Thank you. And again, that'll be a decision of the board. That's not a commitment I can make. However, I would note that during the discussion, it was remarked that further refinement and discussion around the provisions in the bylaw will continue to be ongoing, that this was an improvement that was necessary, and that doesn't mean by adopting the bylaw that further input on future revisions to the bylaw wouldn't be taken. And in fact, I understand Electoral Area Services is planning to continue to discuss it. I believe Mr. McDonald's comment was it would be later in the fall. But that the provisions and changes to the bylaw in the short term would provide some much needed relief to some of the concerns. But I did hear what I sensed was it may not be perfect, but it's an improvement over what's in the bylaw today and provides more regulation and some contemplation of a dramatic reduction in Site C permits at all. So I know that my understanding is there's going to be continual follow-up. If the board decides between now and adoption to make changes and reframe the bylaw, it would only delay any improvements to the existing bylaw, but that would be the choice of the board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans. And I just want to say to you, Mr. Yearling, Ms. Kaufman, and those who have continued to give input on this, don't get the impression that it hasn't been useful. I heard comments from multiple directors during the discussion that they felt that it helped inform the improvements to the bylaw. And I think, at least I shouldn't suppose, but I believe that on the whole, that the improvements to the bylaw are indeed improvements, but no question that we'll continue to monitor how effective it is, and if changes are necessary, make them within the framework of our responsibilities and legislation as always. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I believe, just by my screen in front of me, next on our question period list, do we have Ms. Kaufman?
That's correct.
Go ahead, Ms. Kaufman. Go ahead, Ms. Kaufman. I don't know if she can hear us or not. We could hear her. Ms. Kaufman, she's probably got the wrong audio feed or something. We can hear you. I don't think Ms. Kaufman can hear us. We can hear you. Yeah, I'm not sure if she can hear us. We can hear her.
I can't hear her.
Oh, I heard her say hello twice.
Oh, okay.
We can hear you. Go ahead, Miss. Okay, just say,
Hello?
yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No, no worries.
Ongoing issues here. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you guys have had a long day. Mr. Chair, once again, we've
Ms. Kaufman, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Chair, once again, today some very interesting topics were presented. I would also like to acknowledge the staff for the reports on the communications and the soil deposit bylaw. It's not perfect, but it's much better than it was. I would just like to say the public is the eyes and ears for law enforcement, whether it's bylaw or police. Mr. Chair, we heard Ms. Cheroff mention the public notice procedure. As you likely realize, the current requirements are far outdated and do not reflect the way people receive information today. I understand that Ms. Cheroff has been working on some new distance requirements, etc. My question is when and how will these requirements and engagement strategies be updated?
So that would be within the work plan. I would have to follow up with Ms. Cheroff. I did hear Mr. McDonald say that if we're talking about the soils bylaw, that further discussion on further possible improvements to that bylaw would likely not come forward until later in the fall. But in terms of distance requirements, I can follow up with Ms. Cheroff and find out where it may be in their work plan. I do note that there are requirements under the Local Government Act and Community Charter around notice provisions, but I do understand that local governments can choose to extend those. But I would have to follow up with Ms. Cheroff on the timing of that.
True, and I appreciate what you say, and I appreciate the fact that you'll follow up on that. Can I have a follow-up question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, it was good to hear that the bylaws can be updated and perhaps even on an ongoing basis. Several of our bylaws and permits, particularly development permits based on equally old, in some cases, decades old zoning. When or how can these bylaws and permits be evaluated? Right now, we can see developers have the ability to apply for changes, but not really an opportunity for the public to request changes.
So that is essentially what the process that we're going through. Obviously, when you have sort of housekeeping amendments, those are generally fairly simple and they come forward on a sort of a cyclical basis. When you're doing major investments in process like an OCP, naturally development permit area and zoning amendments may flow out of that in terms of having alignment with the OCP. I think we can see how stops and starts, and we've seen several, especially around OCP and zoning challenges in the region over the last decade, can distract from getting the bigger pieces done. And there is a finite amount of capacity amongst a staff. So really, those are decisions that the board can make, but consistently with some deviation when the board or the committee felt necessary, they've continued to focus on the heavy lifting required around the OCP, and then flowing out of that, further possible major amendments. I'm not presupposing an outcome to zoning or development permit regulations. But again, that was always a decision of the committee and board. And if the committee or board decided to reprioritize the resources that are available or provide additional resources through budget amendments, that would be the decision of the committee or board. But as I said, I think this shows that staff are trying their best to respond. We're talking about the soil deposit bylaw to challenges that emerge through experience and doing their best to make updates whenever possible. But if we continually sort of chase, and this isn't a disrespectful term, I say this at council all the time, but chase the squirrel that we notice, it might be at the cost of the bigger, more critical elements that I think we all know need to be done around the OCP, and then subsequent to that, zoning and development permit guidelines that flow out of OCP work. So that's my best answer. If it's not satisfactory, I can, I'm going to note here to follow up with Ms. Churlf on the timing of distance requirements coming forward. But that's the understanding I have both municipally and from the regional district around making sure we take care of the big pieces, and a lot of the small pieces will flow out of that. And hopefully, as we've seen in the past, when the OCP is adopted, we don't get distracted by other things and we're able to focus on making the zoning and development permit area amendments that would align with the new OCP and solve probably a lot of the challenges that you're speaking of.
Thank you. And I really do hear what you're saying, and I do appreciate the staff and directors for supporting some interim bylaw amendments that have been happening. But it kind of takes me back to what I said in public input, was we're looking at an adopting an HOCP, but we're 2 to 3 years down the road, according to your staff, for a harmonized zoning bylaw. And I don't expect you to answer this today, but how will that work if we have an updated HOCP, but not an updated harmonized zoning bylaw?
So really, I have to give the same answer. If we're distracted by other elements that'll flow naturally out of an OCP process, both harmonization and modernization, that timeline that you just spoke of would only be extended and would really continue to hurt the community on a more holistic basis. That's the best answer I can give right now. But I believe that providing and maintaining a focus on the OCP amendments and then the subsequent zoning and development permit area amendments is the best path forward for the region. Otherwise, with the change in political leadership and stuff that happens naturally every 4 years now, we may never get to that finish line. So I can only speak as a municipal director. I know all other municipal directors are all going through OCP processes of our own, and it's absolutely critical that we keep a focus on those so that we can set more holistic, better land use policies.
I appreciate that. I'm just wondering about the implementation piece of it.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. This is turning into a
Mr.
debate.
Kuhn, Director Kuhn, I was about to say I think the question's been asked and answered. I appreciate your point of order. I'm doing my best to chair the meeting. Ms. Kaufman, I think we've heard your input, both in input and in the form of the questions during question period. All the directors have heard you as well as our staff. So I will follow up on a couple items from today and hopefully get answers back to you quickly so that I don't have to be in trouble if I forget before our next board meeting. So I'm going to do these right now.
Thank you for doing a great job, Chair Stone.
Thank you. Any further questions for question period, Ms. Legault?
There are not.
Okay, thank you. So I would ask for a motion, I believe, Ms. Legault, to go into closed session.
To close the meeting in accordance with the Community Charter, Section 91 G and E.
Thank you. Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Sebring. All those in favor? Any opposed? Before you log out, Ms. Legault, we're going to switch to a different meeting, say in 10 minutes.
Whenever
Okay.
you'd like, I'll start the meeting as soon as we
Okay.
close this one.